Ryan Dahl here with Jonsal and Tiffany from Elevation. The day doesn't
Hello.
get better than this for me, talking to the two of you. So I am
We feel the
so
exact same
thrilled.
way.
Do
Yes.
you really? Oh,
Yes.
What an honor.
what an honor. I know it's kind of like the two of us, we sort of work hand in hand. I'm the little, the little guy up here in Canada, but we're thrilled for you. And especially in this season right now, I don't know if you have seen in PraiseCharts. It looks like in PraiseCharts that we just work for Elevation because your music is kind of your last album sort of overtook here. I'll just show you here if we look.
Wow.
It's like Elevation. Well, we do have Phil Wickham. He stuck his nose in there, and then Cody Carnes. But all of the top songs right now are from your new album, and justifiably so. They're great songs. And
Wow.
why don't you just tell me a little bit about your roles in Elevation and just what this current season feels like, just with this new batch of songs that you have. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jonsal.
So I have been a worship leader, a part of Elevation Church for going on 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I've led in just multiple capacities here on staff, but I've gotten the opportunity to go and minister all over places in the world, and especially here throughout the U.S. and with multiple locations. And so it has been a beautiful journey, but I'm so thankful, like you were just mentioning. It's crazy to see songs that God will take into
Yeah.
spaces that we've never imagined. And
Yeah.
it's easy to kind of lose sight. Sometimes when you're in the context of church, you're leading week after week after week, but you're starting to hear stories, and year after year, you see just people sharing what God is doing through these songs. And that's been an honor, and it's been so special. So I've been a part for a few years now. My wife and I both serve together, and that's a dream as well. She's
Love
not on
it.
here, but
Yeah, that's all right. And Tiffany,
Yes.
you're such a great member of the team. I've told you this time and time again how much I love your voice, your heart, the way it comes through, and you always have that one or two songs that's like, oh, just slay me right now. So
Aw.
that's really great.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah.
That's so kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, John, Sal, and Jenna, they're kind of the OGs of the team. I came on the team about 5 years ago, and it's just been such a privilege just to get to learn from everybody that's been doing this for years and get to join, get to add my voice, and truly such a privilege. Like he was saying, like we're local church people, and we're every single weekend like leading our church in worship and introducing these new songs and seeing how our people will respond. And so a lot of times our church is singing these songs for months and months and months before we actually end up releasing them. And then partners like you guys are putting them out for other churches to sing, which thank you for what y'all do. It's seriously so incredible. But so I'm just a member of the team leading worship every single week. Sometimes get to help write, and it's just such an honor to get to steward what God's doing in this house through song, through music, and
Beautiful.
we're so excited about the project. Can you imagine, though? I think for, like Tiff mentioned, it's funny because we'll live with some of these songs in-house through our church, and they are familiar, but there's no official recording out. And so it's funny, you kind of see just another wave when we released just a few weeks back. It's like you're hearing new people that are experiencing some of what's happening in our church and a part of our locations and campuses. And so that's been exciting. And just the honor again to be able to take something new, a new song that God has placed on our heart, and just bring it and lift it up, in the church context. And so this is a very corporate worship album, and I love that because we need it. There's so many weeks where you start the worship experience, you start your service, and you're like, I need an up-tempo song. I need to get these people in just this framework of praising. And so there's a little bit of that. You have, of course, like you mentioned, Tiff, this beautiful ballad that you can reflect. But it's all within the context, I feel like, very easy to sing and very easy to introduce. Even if it's the first time that you're doing it, you can take it in, but then you can also, there's an invitation to respond with that as well. So it's exciting. We're really happy about what God is doing right now.
Well, we could talk about all the songs, but I thought let's just go in on two songs in particular that the two of you were leading, and then you can just give us a little window into that. And then after that, I have a question I want to ask that's just broader than the album and just about worship at Elevation. But first of all, just like let's start with you, Jonsal, and looking at this song. I think it was Nobody. Look at that. We got a beautiful picture of you right there on
Oh, there we
PraiseCharts.
are.
And this is what your song looks like when you put all the piano parts, the lead sheet, and then look at that. I mean, we've got like the full orchestration there. So we've written all the trumpet, sax, trombones,
That is taking me back
strings.
to a time when I used to read sheet music. I have
Did
a violin, or I used to play
Yeah.
trombone, and
Yeah.
I don't tell that too often, but it's funny. I'm like, oh, let me see if I can read that sheet
I
music really
know.
quick. No,
And the
yeah,
funny thing is, sometimes you'll write the songs and then it's after the fact that you go, oh, that's what it looks like, that song that we just wrote, and how fascinating it is to see it on paper. So,
I
yeah.
do love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nobody was a special song. Just it was one of the last ones we were working on arrangement wise, leading up to the night of worship. And so what we were kind of landing with is just like, it's the bridge of the song has so much authority. We're speaking to, there's nobody in the grave. There's nobody who can defeat death like Jesus. And so I love when we get to that point, because you can kind of see, okay, wait a minute, even though I feel like whatever's going on in my life and in my world may be overwhelming, there's not an enemy that's going to destroy me because I can believe and trust in Jesus, right? And so
Yeah.
it's super simple, but yet the authority and the power that comes in just declaring that,
Yeah.
it shifts a room. And so that night, I remember, as I would be, just kind of nervous, like making sure I want to get the lyrics right and make sure everything is dialed in. But I just remember experiencing and feeling like a shift in that moment. And it's a simple confession, and I wasn't a part of writing it, but I do love that I had the chance through my own experience and my own faith be able to declare it. And so it's a special one to me, and I've loved, again, it because it is new in church, getting to introduce it and getting to lead. Now it's like I get so excited. I'm like, please understand, there's nobody like Jesus. There's nobody in the grave. There's no one that can, to stop what he's doing. And so I'm very thankful for that song. I'm thankful for the words. It was a special one for sure.
So beautiful. And Tiffany, I know you have a beautiful version of your song from the stage, but I think it was just yesterday I was browsing through YouTube, and there you are in some hallway with an acoustic guitar, just in the most purest of environments, singing the same song, and it's just like another fresh version. I know sometimes you can get in those acoustic environments and you probably like, let's just record it right here, So tell me about that, even that song being so good.
Yeah. Well, that song, actually, we were not planning to record. Our team did not know it. I did not know the song. It was written earlier that week, and ended up making the call to learn it pretty much the day of. We rehearsed it, learned it. And I can remember when they had sent me the demo, Pastor Stephen, Brandon Lake, and Chandler Moore wrote the song, and just honor them for what a beautiful confession of faith that is. And they had sent me kind of the writing demo, and I just broke down in my car in tears, like to the point where I almost had to pull over my car because of the sweetness of the way that the Lord met me in that moment, remembering his hand over my life. Like I literally felt like there was just a movie that played through my mind of how faithful God has been my entire life. And so it's easy to lead a song like that when I was so easily connected with the lyrics of, the simplicity of, you've been so good to me. God, I can't believe how you love me. What a friend you've been. There's almost nothing truer I could say about the way that the Lord's been in my life. And so leading it, there was zero pressure to try and make it be something. It just was true. And I think people catching on to that in the night of worship, and then beyond, as people are starting to learn that song specifically, I think that there's just this ease of, this I call to mind, therefore I have hope. The faithfulness of the Lord never ceases. His mercy never comes to an end. And I think that's just kind of the echo of that song, is an echo of that timeless scripture to me. So it works on an acoustic in a little hallway, and I think it works in a big room full of people all
Yeah,
singing together, and so it's
for sure.
I truly feel so honored to have gotten to sing it.
You know what I love about both of your stories with these songs, and I say this a lot of times to worship leaders, because we're often leading songs that we haven't written, but when you lead them, you need to lead them like you wrote them. And that's kind of what I'm hearing
Absolutely.
from you, is that you didn't write these songs, but you brought them to the table as though they were your own, and they made them your own. And it almost doesn't matter then who wrote the song. Was it Elevation or Hillsong or Bethel or whatever? It's like, I am leading this song from me right now, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you're just even demonstrating that even in your role in this album, right? So I think that's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
And it's so important. I think about that quite often, actually. It's
Hmm.
you can go to any church, and at any point, you're going to have maybe a few songs that other people have written. And to never lose the heart and the idea of prayerfully that it's Bible based, right? We're singing
Yeah.
the truths of what God
Mhm.
is, who He is, what He's done for us. But then, it's important, if there was no conviction or any authority behind what you're singing, people
Mm.
would
Yeah.
miss. And the Spirit, I don't feel like, would be able to. He wouldn't, maybe even beyond the box we put ourselves in. But I think the Holy Spirit would be so sad if our faith and our revelation wasn't true, and we weren't
Mm.
confessing it to Him first, but then also leading it to others. And so I think about so many worship leaders across the country, across the globe,
Hmm.
and it's so important to be able to practice and understand, hey, this means something in my soul. This is my song to
Yes.
you, Lord. This
Hmm.
is my offering to you. And it is important, and it's not missed, and you're not doing anything wrong if you're not writing the songs that
Right.
you're leading. I think
Right.
it's a tool that can be used, and
Yeah.
so many people might be blessed. They might have a new revelation of who Jesus is. And so it's
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned it, because it's so true,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think it's a
Beautiful.
healthy challenge.
All right, so I had thought of a question I wanted to ask you. I feel like this would be on the hearts of a lot of worship leaders around the world or the nation right now, is wanting some tips in how they can help intentionally develop a worship culture in their church. Like, I can imagine what it feels like as a worship leader to just so want their church to respond and engage and just expressed like that. And so I feel like we do see that certainly through the highly produced and wonderful videos that, Elevation has. And then there's every other church service that might not have all that production. But can you give us a few tips as to how a worship leader could be intentional in developing a very engaged worship culture in their own local environment? Maybe both of you have some ideas on that. So go
Yeah.
ahead.
I think here at Elevation, we are extremely passionate about what it is to worship the Lord in a corporate time. And a lot of it was rooted when Pastor Stephen launched and you know, built a lot of the church and the teams. Worship was a very clear vision that it would help be a tool and support in ways
Mm.
that, some people would maybe find Jesus through a song that they wouldn't hear in a sermon, that they wouldn't hear in showing up to a church building. So I think aligning that heart and aligning the teams to support that has always been huge in
Mhm.
building the culture. But the important thing is, like, I feel we're constantly aligned with what he's speaking and the revelation that God has given him through the word. So often he's writing based on those scriptures, based on the principle. And so essentially worship is kind of supporting with melody and lyric a lot of what he's teaching already.
Mhm.
And so that's a big component. And I know it may vary just based on the context of where you're leading, if you're listening to this, but
Mhm.
I think just aligning your heart and knowing, hey, we're not working at two different goals.
Yeah.
We're truly working together. And when
Hmm.
the pastor is clear on, hey, I want to establish a time where we're worshiping vertically, we're just lifting up the
Mm.
name of Jesus, and this is very important. how can you do that through song? How can you do that through melody? How can you do that through excellence? So building up your teams, making sure that everything is prepped so that there, is a space for that. I think is a big foundation, and we build a lot on those principles.
Yeah,
Very good.
absolutely. I think also just Jonsal and his wife Jenna, they do a really good job at showing up for the team and kind of building that relationships off platform. When you worship together, it's such an intimate thing. But having a foundation out off the platform, I think, is really helpful to build a culture of worship. One other thing I'd add is, I think what always helps me is getting such a broader understanding of worship culture. Like, to me, it's not just what we do before the sermon, and it's the prep before. Although worship does soften our hearts and prepare us to receive the seed from, like, the word of the Lord. Worship in heaven is 24/7. Like, it's not a warm up for something. It is happening all the time. And so also looking at our times of worship corporately as such a broader thing of, like, this is actually our purpose on earth, to glorify the Lord, and to do that in a setting where we're all, like, kind of with one another, feeding off each other's faith, like declaring things, scriptures and truths over each other. Like, that is such a powerful thing. And I think it all goes back to our identity as Christians, of what we were even created to do on this earth.
And it works hand in hand. And I love that, through the heart and through the soul and the spirit. But then when you put your hands to the work and mold and create, there's beauty in the principle and the heart that doesn't deflect from the purpose that we're called to, is worshiping Jesus. But I also love that a layer of that is preparing the best that we can for the Lord. And so I just love, I love what you're saying. I love the heart. Nothing else. You cannot bring a performance without the heart and without the understanding of the purpose. And so that's important for building a worship culture, and that will change anything if you realign it with your team and anyone that executes it. So
I definitely hear a lot in various conversations I've had with people at Elevation that the role of the senior pastor as well, like, because you don't see, even at Elevation, even though he's a part of the songwriting, he's not on stage leading all those songs, and yet so much a part of building that culture. And I almost wish that more senior pastors would even listen to this little interview we're having, to just remind that it's more than just the worship team that's needed to build this worship culture. It's a full-bodied expression. And maybe you can express a little bit in your experience of how you're being led by your senior pastor to help build this culture that gets then expressed through the worship ministry, but really embraced by the full church. And it can't just be the senior pastor going, well, I prepare the message and hopefully the songs, go with the sermon. And
I love Pastor Stephen is extremely musical, and he is such a creative. And so he is one of the primary writers of what, is coming out of this house. And I'm thankful for that, because again, I feel like there's a clear line of where God, what he's downloading into his spirit for the church, for the flock, and for the people. And so we're not kind of going in a way that and it's helpful just to kind of have that alignment. Now, I would say one of the most practical things is lately, in every project he's been coming in and he's been helping just kind of produce and work things and work arrangements. And what I love is his perspective for, as he's sitting out in the experience and along with the people, is he's going to have an understanding that we may not catch. He's going to have a perspective that, we're constantly maybe on platform and thinking through everything, thinking through our ear mix, thinking through the clicks and stems and all. And I just love that there's a voice, not only with the revelation through the word, but also a practical thing of, hey, I can catch a tone, I can catch a sense that maybe you're not going to catch just from being on the other side. And so that's been helpful, not kind of backing away from working through that and kind of massaging things in terms of we want to refine this the best way so we can present this with excellence. And so that's the heart behind why we would get, behind, getting with your pastor and working through all of that.
Yeah.
And those are small little practicals for it.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add there, Tiffany, as far as your experience with Stephen and perhaps even others on your non-musical pastoral team that are really engaged in this, in building the broader culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does go, our staff is bought into,
Yeah.
it's like we're all bought into what we're doing as a church. Like Jonsal
Yeah.
was saying, it's not the worship team's doing this and our outreach department is doing this. It's like we're all doing all of it. Like, and I think that does help, like having staff that are like, well, we don't really know this song yet, but we're going to try it out today, and they're going to be engaged and bought in because
Yeah.
they believe in, the vision of the worship department, and like as
Yeah.
we just operate as one body, as one church. And
Right.
it is such a blessing to do that alongside our pastor, who's kind of like forefronting the vision. And it's easy to get behind somebody with vision, especially when it's to build the church. Like, what a beautiful thing to give our lives to. So I would just say, like, it's kind of a church-wide,
Totally.
everybody's bought into the mission and vision of our church. And makes it easy.
Well, it sure does express itself. I was also thinking, Jonsal, about what could we say to pastors out there who aren't part of the worship ministry, and maybe they're not musical, so they're not like songwriters. They don't really get chord progressions. They don't even barely know what a multi-track is. So, but how can they not be intimidated by engaging in this part of their church ministry versus just relegating it to the guy they hired,
Sure.
I think trust works both ways. And so at a certain point, who you've hired and who you've asked the Lord, hey, I'm trusting that this is the right individual to help lead this worship ministry and build the culture with. And also believing, maybe you don't have that musical experience, maybe you're not so involved, but a conversation of, hey, this is what I want to accomplish this weekend. I want to push people to a better understanding of maybe baptisms, an outward expression. Maybe it's, I want to challenge the hearts of those to commit to building the kingdom. You can put language and melody and songs to support that, right? So it's an easy conversation, and that sounds so basic, but I think it should work that way. And maybe you're not going to be as involved in the actual arrangements and the transitions and which set list, but it should always be a week-to-week conversation and say, hey, is this lining up with the word? Is this lining up with how we can support you as a pastor? And the pastor should also say, and I would hope, put the resource and put the staffing and put the energy into building within the team that's executing the worship. That's what I mean. It works both ways. And I think that God honors and the preparation before you show up, where it's not like weekend of, I'm frustrated because you're going in a different direction. I think that I've seen that happen. And honestly, I feel like a few conversations can kind of help get both individuals, both leaders, anyone who's involved in the right direction.
That's good.
And just with a better understanding.
Very good. Very good. I can remember, like, as I've led worship several times in my history, sometimes you go through a Sunday and I just feel exhausted and spent, and I come back to the office on Tuesday morning and I have defined memories of when my senior pastor poked his head in the door and just was like, hey, Ryan, that was unbelievable on Sunday, or just some kind of like word of affirmation, like how I get shivers even as I say that right now. So just wanting to convey, I guess this is to a lot of senior non-musical pastors out there, just to know how important you are. And if you're just, if you're worship leaders here, maybe send this off to them and just be like, wow, I feel like this is inspiring. And another thing too is when I'm leading worship and I'm scanning the congregation, if my pastor is in that front row and engaged, like how meaningful that can also be, because the congregation sees that in their view, and the worship pastor sees that in their view, and it's such a kind of a unifying force that
Absolutely.
helps to build that culture. So I just feel like I wasn't planning on, making this about senior pastors, but I just
love
feel
it.
like leadership is important, right? And
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
like
That's so
you can't,
powerful.
yeah, you can't just build a worship culture just off of great songs.
Right.
You have to have leadership to support then the great songs. And so
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think the invitation going to just building a worship culture, and back to alluding to what you were saying, it's such a beautiful thing to watch and introduce a new expression to the church, because there's already a foundation laid, and they know, hey,
Mm-hmm.
my goal right now is not to worry and critique and be concerned about the song or the music or the presentation, from a tech support and standpoint. But
Mm-hmm.
no, my focus is I'm going to use this as language to lift up my worship. And I think that's the heart of, I feel like, what every church would want and every worship culture should be built on. So it's not getting caught up on what the package is, but more who it's for and how we engage in that ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So great. Well, Tiffany and Jonsal, I feel so privileged to work alongside of you with all the music that comes out of your team. You're a tremendous inspiration to me and obviously so many people that get music through Praise Charts. So and thanks for your words and just kind of practical insight in the inner workings of worship at Elevation. It's really inspiring and a great privilege to work along with you.
Thanks, Ryan. We feel the same way. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, this is Ryan Dahl and Jonsal and Tiffany from Elevation Worship, and definitely go check out the latest songs from their album. It's so inspiring. All you got to do is go to the homepage of Praise Charts and you'll stumble right on it, at least for the next few weeks. So that's where it'll be, and we'll see you there. Thank you very much. God bless you all.